Yamas, my G's. How are you doing? And special welcome to our 46 new subscribers from Greece who came along from the Unboxholics YouTube channel, who used one of my songs, Myanmar. Thanks a lot, guys, for using my track. Really appreciate that. And that was a funny video. If you haven't watched that, I did a little short of the guys' reactions to that song, and it was just classic. Anyway, today, without further ado, if you're new to the channel, make sure you eat bananas every day because they're healthy for you. And aside from that, let's jump straight to today's video. I want to do just a small track breakdown on my last release, which is called Shipwreck. And I actually wrote this song quite quickly. This was actually while I was living in Medellin. So this was in January this year. I wrote this and published it quite sort of soon after I finished it. Since then, I've been writing some other songs, and I got some new songs ready, but I haven't been able to release them yet due to various reasons. However, at the end of this month, so before April, we'll have a new release out. So I'm really excited. I'm going to announce that at the end of this week. Announce the track title and the collaborator and everything. Some of you guys probably already know who the collaborator is. Anyway. Yeah, so a little tradition that I like to do sometimes before like I release a new song is to give like a few tips and things and secrets away from my previous release. So today we're going to dive into Shipwreck, which is a really fun song. I still really enjoy it. And we're going to talk about firstly the drums, then we're going to talk about the synth basses, and then we're going to talk about all the leads and effects. So without further ado, let's dive in and check out the drums from Shipwreck. Alright, so one of the cool things about the drums is they're very easy to explain because they're quite simple, to be fair. They're out of all the tracks that I've composed, I would say they're very kind of functional. They don't have like super lots of like too much character. What we do have though is we have some cool kind of natural drums that I use in the intro. These are the kind of bluesy drums that you hear. So we sort of start from the beginning. So I often use like, I'll often have these little sort of impact kicks and things like that. And at the intro, just to sort of give a little anchor for the group, the kind of metronome almost, you know. So I have a couple of these sort of impact kicks, and I make sure that I don't use the same powerful kick from my drop. So it's often the same kick brought to a new channel, and then just turned down a lot, and then put some more reverb to wash it out and make it softer. What you'll notice here is I've got this little rattle as well, and I actually use this rattle on the actual main kick on the drop as well. So that's one thing that is a little bit unique about these drums is I just got one kick sample, and it's a sample that I just found in a pack that I just thought sounded great, nice and punchy and aggressive. And then I got this rattle to layer on top of it. Okay, so that one's giving the kick like a bit of an organic texture, because it's quite an organic song, really. I would sort of describe it as an organic folk neurofunk track. So yeah, but there's a lot of natural elements. So yeah, that basically, you know, layering that in with the kick is very simple. You just sort of take out the low end and like make it quiet. Make sure there's no like super high transient on it. So you can see I've taken the attack out on the transient. So the main kick is still carrying all the weight of the initial transient, you know. So the rattle is just a sort of tail kind of thing, you know. So that's it for the kick. So pretty simple. Obviously, like my drums will go like into a bus. Usually I'll actually, I don't know why I haven't done it here, but I usually put my cymbals into a group and then compress them and then put them into a final drum bus. That's what I normally do. But on this one, I wrote this really quickly and I was a bit lazy and I just didn't really do that. So I just put everything into one drum bus and that was it, really. So yeah, it's not the same technique every time. But yeah, so what happened next then is I obviously added a snare. So yeah, I've got a nice like tight snare, which is if I take a little look on Span, you'll see this is the one that has the fundamental kind of low end, but the low end is still pretty high up. So that fundamental part of the snare is sort of around, yeah, it's sort of around 400 or 500, and so it's a really, really high up kind of snare, you know. But what I've done is I've layered it with a few different sounds. So we've got this live snare, okay. We've got this clap, and this clap, as you can tell, it's got a lot of sort of delay on it, and that's the Rift feedback light. And I like the ping pong mode because it gives you a stereo clap. So obviously this layer is really like soft, a bit more in the background and in the high end, a little bit more, you know, it doesn't really have any low end in. So I'm stereoing that. So the main snare is still kind of majoritively like the powerful mono aspect. And then these layers are like, I'm playing more with the stereo image on these. Same with this one. So it's another kind of clap, but it's less, it's got a bit less high end. It's a bit more of a muddier kind of clap, you know, but it fills out a little bit more of the kind of lower treble, I would say, perhaps. So those are the layers of the snare. Yeah, and so like that main snare, like it's kind of the 80-20 rule for me. So it's 80% that main snare, and those extra 3 layers are this extra 20%, and they're really in the background. So they're lower in volume. They got like, you know, like reverbs and delays on, and taking the low end out, and they're pushed like in the further back in the room. So they give the snare depth. So by comparison, that's the idea with the snare layering. You want your layers to provide that depth in the background. There's no point having like loads of upfront snares at the same time, because then you're kind of defeating the point of creating like a 3-dimensional sounding snare. So that's why it's important to make them place them further into the background. Yeah. So with our kick, rattle, and our snare, you know, that's the majority of the beat already, you know. But we've got to get some hats in there to provide a little bit of extra kind of rhythm. So we've got this slow hat. So this is just again, it's just a hat loop from a sample pack. So that's I think that's kind of my main hat that just is sort of the metronome hat, keeping the rhythm. And I used a loop for that, of course. And then I've got these. It's sort of the same rhythm here, but it's kind of a bit more white noise in a sense. It's more like just a soft white noise filler. So it just fills out the frequencies a little bit more, because obviously this first hat is a bit more natural, and it doesn't like fill out the whole range of the high end, because I want to flatten out the high end as much as I can and like fill in the missing frequencies. So white noise, you know, white noise is very flat, so that can help fill out the gaps. So yeah, these kind of hats, they're kind of like yeah, you can hear it's majoritively sort of white noise. Then what is this one here? Very similar again, a kind of another white noisy soft hat. The important thing is we've got that white noise from the hats to fill out the high end, keeping the groove. Like I said, drums are really, really simple on this track. So then later on in the track, I've got like a few extra elements that come in. So we've got some more sort of drum layers to tell the story. So yeah, like as the track progresses in the different sections, we have these really nice realistic drums that have been obviously, like, I've just used a recording of a real drum kit, and then I've like reverbed it out a lot and taken out the low end, and it provides like a really nice depth here. And so yeah, in the context of the whole drum group, then that just, you know, provides a real nice kind of wetness to the whole drums. You know, without that layer, you know, it really fills out the background a lot. And yeah, it's important to have that background filled out with things like this that entail a lot of reverb. The sort of section before, there's a lot of reverb and things that happen from the guitar leads and things like that. So that's really filling out the background. So we'll move on to that shortly. But in this section, you know, I wanted to switch up what's filling out the background. So here I'm getting a really nice wet drum layer to really take up a lot of that like background reverb space. So those are really nice there. And yeah, a couple of things. We've got these, like I said, I mentioned these natural drums in the intro as well. So this is my from like a bluesy rock sample pack, just a live drumming loop, which sounds wicked. It gives you that bluesy kind of feeling, you know. And when we add in our like upright bass and our guitars later, together with that, it creates that bluesy vibe. But that's a really cool drum beat for the intro. I really like that. And I use it. I kind of just use it a little bit in the little drops and the little fills here. So we have these little fills during the track where I might exaggerate the lead guitar, and just in those moments where I want to get a bit sort of extra bluesy, then I use a little bit of that sample again. It doesn't really play at the same time as the main sort of neurofunk drum beat that I've made up here, all that kind of powerful kick and snare. It doesn't really layer up with it at the same time at any point, I don't believe. It's just being used either or. So we're using that kind of natural blues drums as little fills, because they've got their kicks and snares in, and I'm not trying to layer up those kicks and snares with my kicks and snares, so they only really happen like separately from each other. So that's the main thing with those kind of natural drums. Other elements, little kind of shaker that comes in here, and you can hear that there's these extra things in the background we've got up here as well. Okay, so just another sort of hat loop that's been like really reverbed out. But yeah, the idea is, of course, that we sort of tell the story through the drums using these extra like layers that come in and out. And those extra layers, they're like usually filling out the background. So they often have reverb on and things like that as well. So that's basically all we got. This kind of build up here. Again, we're mainly using that blues drum recording loop again here for this part. Then we go back into our drop, and it's basically, again, like just using my sort of powerful kick and snare samples with a little bit of layering in the high end from those kind of blues hats, So, but not trying to layer the kicks and snares together, really. So that's basically the kind of drums. And yeah, so in a sense, they, the main ones that provide all that kind of power and anchoring and neurofunk aspect to the track, pretty simple, to be fair. The rhythms and everything pretty classic. The only thing that sort of makes this track cool is having those kind of real blues drums in. But like I said, how I've used them within the track is I've used them kind of separately, so I'm not layering the kicks and snares up together. I'm using them in the little fills and in the intro, and then I'm using parts of it where we just take the hi-hat from the hi-hat recording and reverb that and add that in as a layer to provide a bit of progression through the track in the drum narrative. So let's move on to the synth bass.
Yo, my G's, just got to do some quick shout outs as well. So big ups to Deep Rot, big ups to Manuel, as always, on the first comment. Shout out to my student Chris Him from PR. Big ups to Remedy on the last video, he said excellent slurp. And Daz as well says shout out to your hair in this video. Really outstanding. I look like an anime character or something. Yeah, and big ups to all the UH family who came across the channel recently. All the Greek squad. Thanks for joining and checking out the Myanmar video. How can this only have 1.2k views? Well, since you guys joined, it's almost at 2k now, I think, so that's really appreciated. Big ups to Palmer X as well, who's commenting on the Shakuhachi release. Shout out to Sponos as well, who enjoys the Myanmar track. Panos Tade as well. Crazy Gamer, loving the tune as well. And Angelos Rio Sot. And also Charge. He says, how do you know Unboxholics? I just met them recently. Just through YouTube, so that's great. And Genius as well says that's amazing. Also Mario, I can't read the Greek alphabet for that one, someone else from the UH Army, but big ups to all UH Army squad. Let's get back into the video.
So I was having a lot of issues with those drums because the project kept crashing. So anyway, I bounced them all out, so hopefully I'll have less interference now while I'm recording. However, let's get into the synth basses here. So yeah, when I wrote this track, I kind of had the drums, and then I had the minus the bluesy aspect of the drums, so the main kind of neurofunk drums, and then I had these kind of synths that I think there were a lot of them were sort of presets and things that I'd made previously in Vital, and I was playing around with like a bunch of different ones. And then I sort of had this whole like Neurofunk track without the blues elements, you know. So that's how it kind of started. So those elements were only added in later in the composition, you know. So if we kind of sort of take a listen without all the other stuff. So that's sort of how I sort of started the track, just with those two main groups, you know, just the drums and the bass. And so what you'll notice about these, the basses here, they're quite complex rhythmically. And it was a lot of going through a lot of process of like bouncing out little sections and moving them around. So it's quite a mishmash of like kind of small bass audio files. It's not one of these tracks where I've sort of used like the main MIDI and sort of kept that as like the main kind of groove, you know. The groove has really come from like the programming and the editing. Yeah, it's been a little bit of a chaotic kind of one to write. But there is sort of one main bass group that kind of ties everything together. So it's the Harry Ford. I think it's a preset on one of my Vital packs, I believe. So this is the main. So when I programmed it in the Vital, I was sort of holding down the MIDI note, and it was going do no 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 do no 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 no. And then what I've done is I've sort of chopped it up after that, you know. But it still contains a bit of that classic kind of rhythm that was in the original MIDI, you know, just with a lot of chops to add detail, you know. So what I do then as well, which is quite interesting, is I sort of got, I guess there's sort of two main ones, but really the main one is just this channel here. This one up here is also... This is the whole MIDI, but what I'm doing is I'm doing some hocketing here, which is basically where we use the one file, but we put them on two channels and we change the audio of one. So it's still the same instrument, but we're slightly affecting one channel. So some of these notes are going to have a slightly different tone, and so that's sort of the idea of hocketing, where you change the sort of voicing. And so all I've done is on this one down here, you can see I've got my ruiner on, and it's quite it's modulating, so we just have a little bit of distortion coming in and out, but that is only happening on this lower channel, and the top one is clean. So we've got this this change in the harmonic content in the bass as it goes along, so it becomes a little bit more interesting, you know, as a bass line. And so this is like the main the main bass, like the fundamental bass audio, but then I've got some layers on top. So this is where I've called it the stereo Ford. And what I've done here is I've used something which is the M utility, and it basically I've inverted the left channel, so it's sort of flipping the phase, and then I've got a bunch of things happening. We've got we're sort of delaying the channel as well, so it's 100% delay with the Rift feedback light. So I'm just really just focusing only on the stereo and then flipping the phase of it, and so that's creating basically this extra layer called the stereo Ford, which you can hear it's just on the sides, and so we're processing a new layer on top just in the sides to add extra stereo width, you know. And this is the Ford layer, so this is another another little chop of audio. And again here what I've done is I've added not as much delay this time, but I've added quite a lot of reverb as well. And I think it's probably been processed before this as well, but you can hear it's really wet, so it's mostly just reverb signal, you know, it's just a little kind of reverb chops. So together with that, these are like the kind of background detail parts to the bass. But yeah, because they're like either super reverbed or delayed, or kind of flip the phase on them, they don't really phase with the originals. So that's the important point. So when you add them back in, yeah, they add these like extra stereo details that makes the whole bass like wider than it actually is. but yeah, done in such a way that it doesn't phase. So that's important, that you like really, reverb it a lot, or yeah, try flipping the phase or things like that. So yeah, those are like the main things that constitute the whole kind of base of the track, because I kind of use that throughout most of the first section, and then again on the second drop. So it's basically, it's the most important mid-bass element, and I use it like quite a lot. But yeah, having all those details and things that change during the bass line keep it a bit interesting, so I'm able to sort of reuse it a bit more, so went quite in on the detail of it. So yeah, that's the Harry Ford bass. And then you can see there's a few other like chops and bloops and bleeps and things like that. So if I just play those, these are like the kind of little accents. And yeah, I can't like explain why I used it in particular parts. This was just like writing the groove, looping the drums, and just like moving these sections around to like find a point where they like accentuate the groove and add a little accent to the groove. So obviously they're really important to have in there still. Especially these two here, the Picture a Sub and the No Surrender. So these are all just my Vital presets from, I think, the Vital Mindshift pack, or yeah, maybe the one before, but that one definitely, I think there's some sounds in here. And so I'm just using like a quick little one note of random presets to create like the little call and response here, Yeah? So it's nothing like crazy, it's just these little sort of one-shots. A lot of like little one shots that just complement the main like Harry Ford bass that I've got here, Yeah, so that's essentially like the synth bass part. Like once you've got your head around that, it's not there's not too much more to it than that. Other apart from the processing, it goes into this giant synth bass group here, where like I've EQ'd it a load of times and I've sidechained it to the kick and sidechained it to the snare and things like that. But that's like, that's standard practice. You guys know how to do that. If you don't, then hit me up for mentorship and I'll show you precisely. But yeah, it's nothing like super adding any extra color or tone. A lot of it's come just from the Vital presets, to be fair. So yeah, that's the main like bass section. And then in this like kind of this sort of bridge section, I suppose you would call it, I sort of tend to prioritize a lot of the extra leads and effects, which we're going to get into next. So they really sort of take up all the mid-range and space in that like kind of bridge section. And yeah, the mid bass is just kind of used on like the heavier parts, but obviously it does react a lot with the kind of guitar things, So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about those parts as well, but especially the guitars and the natural bass. So there's like a double bass and there's a guitar, but the way they work with the synth bass is I've written the melody or I've placed the melody around the basses, So but the reason I wanted to talk about the basses first is because that's how I composed the track. I added in those leads and things afterwards, it kind of in the gaps. But yeah, here we've already got like the main groove going. With our drums and everything, it's already like the skeleton of the track is already there. So it already sounds like sick. It's punchy, it's loud, it's clear, it's crispy, it's got the groove. It just doesn't have the special character, It doesn't have the secret sauce yet. So all we're going to do next then is talk about the leads and effects and, yeah, the secret sauce that comes in next. Alright then, so next up, my dudes, the most important part of the track for me is the secret sauce. And this is the reason why I wanted to make this video, is because I just want to encourage you to try and get that sort of extra uniqueness into your track. So it's going to stop you from feeling a little bit bored with the song. It's going to stop you from getting like tired of composing. If you try to think of something that's very unique and different that you can add into what is otherwise already a pretty nice kind of drum and bass groove, you know, absolutely nothing wrong with just the bare bones DNB elements here. You know, as the keyboard reconnects. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Sounds cool, but yeah, I wasn't happy to release it until it had like its own kind of style or flavor, you know. So the first thing I did was to search for a natural like a upright bass shot. We need to get this like just a little dom to sort of fit in somewhere in the composition. So that's how it kind of all started for me. You know that dum dum. You can hear it. I placed it right at the start there, just after the kick. You know, so it's sort of a little offbeat, and then it kind of it has this sort of secondary hit, which is more, which is actually I think on the kick. You know, so the first one's just a little bit off, and the second one's on the beat. So that's it's a nice and funky little rhythm there with the natural bass. You know, the upright bass, double bass, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's how I started, and I ended up down this whole kind of folder of adding in all these extra like organic bluesgrass or blues elements, which you don't have to do. Obviously, this is quite a niche track, but you know, if you can find something that's different to add into your like existing composition, which may be sort of more basic, to provide a bit of color and flavor, then I highly recommend you do that. So let's see what else I've got in my array of sort of organic sounds that come into the track now. So actually one of the favorite things for me is the intro, just this kind of choir. Yeah, beautiful choir sample there in the key of E, as the rest of the track is, and that really sort of sets the tone. And yeah, I don't know, just really starts the story. You know, it's I try to write every song like a story, in a sense, like a little movie. You know, and that really brings you into that world of that song, that sort of choir. And we've got these kind of seagulls and things as well here. We have the sound of the sea, and then here come the seagulls. And we can have these kind of wooden textures with lots of reverb on. So a lot of organic kind of sounds here. And that really, yeah, you see these little wooden kind of sound effects? That really gives a lot of texture and flavour to the song. And even later on during the track, on the drop, I'll reintroduce some of these textures, like the sea, when I want to like amp up the sort of atmosphere. Yeah. So yeah, these are really, really nice ear candy kind of samples, you know. Bit of a sea, bit of seagulls, just to give you that nostalgia feeling. Then these kind of like nice, interesting wooden textures with reverb on. Some kind of white noise sweeps as well. So that's the FX and noise kind of section. But yeah, we got the choir, which is kind of only really used. It's used a lot in the intro, but I do bring it in a little bit on this third section, which is the sort of bridge. So here we have, you know, when the bass kind of dips out, I've got a bit more space in the mid-range, so I sort of reintroduce the choir kind of sample here. Okay, so you kind of hear it a little bit in the background there. But yeah, the other thing that goes with the choir when we're talking about vocals is obviously I got these sort of folk vocals, and they're sort of if I just. Yeah, I've sort of just messed around with the textures for the intro, but they really come in on the sort of build up here. So it's this, you start to hear it sort of creeping in this beautiful kind of folk singing sample. And so again, that's just sort of used in the intro, and I sort of don't really use it on the drop, and it comes again in on the bridge. And then for the second drop, that's what gives the second drop the extra boost. I leave it in for the drop there. You know? Just to give that second drop is like it's like a crescendo, final crescendo of like all of the elements at once. You know, so it was a little bit harder to mix because obviously that's fighting with the mid range. The bass is fighting with the mid range as well, so I had to do some sort of EQ adjustments for that sort of second drop. You know, each 16 bar section is like a whole mix down in itself a lot of the time because you've got different lead elements fighting with each other. So you've got to choose which ones you want to prioritize at each point in the song, you know? So that's what takes a little bit of time to you know, configure the mix down a little bit differently in each of the little sections. But yeah, that's obviously the folk vocals, but let's talk about the main fun part then, which is the kind of the guitars and the bass. So obviously in the intro here, you know, this is our lead element that's driving everything. You know, it's this sort of footloose, kind of like classic bluesy kind of bass riff, like a little bit cheesy in a sense, but yeah, just when I just coupled that up with the drums here that I've already bounced out, but these natural blues drums, as I was talking about earlier. You know, just the marriage of those two elements, that bass and those drums, that just creates that whole bluesy or bluegrassy kind of vibe for the song. You know, especially in the intro, and so yeah, that dome 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 dome. You can hear I use it a little bit in the track later on. This kind of same rhythm. It's the sort of special sound just before the drop as well here. And so I sort of just processed it a little bit differently for the little drop here. It's got a bit of a sort of thing has got a bit of a frequency shifter on. So I kind of got two layers, and one layer has a frequency shifter, so it goes a bit sort of phasey and weird just before the drop, just to give it a bit of a kind of NEUROFUNK or DNB kind of effect edge, you know? Yeah. And then, yeah, like you see later on, I've got these little fills where we just have the no, like for a brief moment in the gaps of the bass. So, you know, between the synth bass. Yeah, so a lot of what I'm doing in now is I'm just filling in a lot of these little gaps that I had in the composition by using the organic sounds. So mostly this sort of double bass little riff here. You know, really like that. Yeah, so it's like it's difficult to explain the exact timings because that was done just through listening on loop over and over again, and then like moving them around till I was happy with the composition sounding like as funky as I could get it, basically. So it's just going for that, like going for the kind of just listening, closing your eyes and trying to like feel like the flow and just trying to get the most funkiest like arrangement that you can with like these little elements that you move around, essentially. Yeah. So then obviously we still have the guitars to talk about and the harmonica as well. So there are a lot of elements in this track. But yeah, the guitars, they kind of we do have them in the build up already. We got these are sort of these blues guitar loops. So that's like yeah, it's kind of just fitting perfectly with the kind of rolling upright bass and the drums here in the intro. But it's placed, you can hear it's placed a lot more in the background, so it's sort of really reverbed out. That upright bass is really the center stage still. So these are just sort of, the guitars are sort of just adding a bit in the background here. Okay, but then very importantly, although these guitars here are sort of more in the background, even on the drop, they really drive the melody of the song, you know? If I add in the bass as well, because they kind of work with the natural bass. So da-dum, da-da-dum, dum 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 dum. It's really like a song, you know. It's not at this point. It's become more than just like neurofunk drum and bass. It's become like yeah, much more of a melodic kind of song. And so that wasn't the original plan. It just kind of worked out like that. This is the sort of thing that happened right at the end, and it just completely sort of changed and transformed the track. Anyway, this is one of my favorite bits where this part in the loop where you got this like kind of, I don't know, I want to say lap steel guitar effect. I don't know what it is, but you know, that's really classic kind of bluesgrassy sound coming through. And I wanted to just exaggerate that and sort of cut everything else out, so you can just really have a little bit of that flavour for a moment. So just really sort of messing with the listener a bit by sort of cutting everything out there sort of halfway through the first drop. So it's sort of something I like to do, is just mess around a little bit there. And yeah. Similar thing here, I sort of just drop things out and then add in some of these organic elements and then come back in with the drums and the bass, you know? And these little sort of accents and things that happen just before the drums and the bass kick back in, the sort of pitching up guitar kind of effect here. Okay, so a lot of interesting, intricate arrangements with the samples, you know? Essentially, it's not like I haven't played the guitar in myself. I've just picked out some really great sounding guitars and then just arranged the samples, you know? It's what DNB is all about. So we're just sample pirates and just arranging things in a new way, you know? That's all we're doing here. But it was easier to place those guitars and things when the drums were already there. We already had a nice kind of bass rhythm with the synth and everything. So these extra guitar like samples and elements are just like providing the little accents and sort of sitting in the gaps, like I mentioned before. And just like, yeah, that's the next dimension of how we like add to the groove always, you know. So we're not trying to take away from the groove. We're trying to just place them in the right spots where we get a little bit extra kind of funkiness from the whole composition. Okay, so that's basically it. And then I just had this harmonica, which didn't really sort of fit the mix down very well. But I really wanted to just get a harmonica in the track as well, so I ended up just placing it really, really low in volume, putting a lot of reverb on, and sort of hoping you wouldn't notice it. So you do hear this sort of chugging of the harmonica, and in the composition, it's very sort of offbeat. So you hear the kind of rhythm of it. It's got its own rhythm, sort of separate to everything else. But because it's sort of so low in the mix, it's got a lot of reverb on, and it's in the key of the track. It kind of just works in there as a sort of almost like a cinematic kind of element in a way, you know. So a lot of rhythms happening sort of independently from each other, but just like when they're sort of placed at the right volume, they kind of just gel together to create like a soundscape, you know. So that's basically the Shipwreck track then. Just playing with a sort of timing on that bass rhythm for the second build up to give it a bit of difference. So we just kind of slow down that upright bass rhythm, and then yeah, just try to play around with the elements that we already had, just in different kind of spaces and timings. And then, like I said, at the end, everything just comes together like all at once. So it was quite hard to mix that part. But yeah, sorry, it was a bit of a long video today. I wasn't planning to spend this much time recording. This is going to be a fun one to edit. But yeah, I hope you get a little bit of inspiration from that today, specifically on, you know, using some extraneous, is that a word? Some extra weird, different sounds in your track that you might not think to use. Don't have to go completely blues or bluesgrassy with it, but you can see how, you know, you can take something and try and fit it in and make it work and give it a different kind of vibe. And yeah, as long as you play with the you know, keep everything in key, of course, and then try to use these little extra sounds to accent certain parts of the groove that you've already created, then you can add this whole extra fun cinematic colouring and layering to your tracks, and there's really no limit. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that video today, my G's. As always, I'll finish with the final plugs. If you want to join Patreon, I've got a absolutely wicked Discord community. Used to be just €5 a month to get in the Discord. Now it's 10 because we have such a tight crew, and I just prefer people are a little bit more serious if they want to join, because sometimes people Fiverr is sort of nothing and they can come in and mess around, but we're quite serious about like motivating each other. So yeah, it's quite a solid crew that we have now. But if you would want to join, you're absolutely more than welcome to. You can find the links down below. And I've got Vital and Faceplant presets on my website as well. If you're struggling with your sound design, you just want some inspiration and you want to take my presets apart and make them your own, download some packs there, some wicked sound sources. And if you want to take your own synthesis to the next level, you want me to show you some tips and tricks one-on-one, you can book me for mentorship sessions. It's available on my website. Have like an automatic calendar that syncs to your time zone, so you can just find a slot that works for you. And there's sort of package discounts if you want to do like multiple lessons. I always advocate like one lesson per week, or minimum kind of one every 2 weeks. Otherwise, you sort of start to lose a bit of momentum. But if you are interested in that, links for that are down below. And talk about with the mentorship, it's really tailored to you. So it's really like diving in on what you need to do the most to improve and to reach your goals. So it's not like a structured course kind of thing, because I don't think that's really that effective. That's what I don't really like, making courses as a whole. I like with like structures and things, because I think you just sort of work together and you just get down to business, and you just learn as you go. I always explain the why behind everything, like while we're working on like a project together. So yeah, that's the best way I think that you learn, like the fastest, in my opinion. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, my G's. Hope you have a wicked rest of your week, and stay tuned for some new Artifact music coming soon. Peace.